So I'm Neil Engle. I'm a producer in Portland, Oregon. I mostly develop bands and mix are my two fortes. I grew up in Malala, Oregon, if anybody knows where that is, and went to Full Sail University. After that, studied under Chris Crummett, became his paid engineer. I worked a little bit under Stephen Hawks, and I was lucky to meet Paul Levitt one time with one band called Me Gosh. I was hanging out in Portland, developing a couple local acts as well as an act from Wyoming, with a couple songwriters in LA, and with Kellen Quinn from Sleeping with Sirens. We're also working on songs for them. And yeah, that's what's going on right now. Yeah, so I was actually a soccer player back in the day. I actually the U11, so 10-year-olds, when the Olympics were in Sydney, Australia, I went down to represent the United States. We lost every single game, so it's not that impressive. Got to see like the Sydney Opera House. That was great. Anyway, after that, I kind of went through I guess it would be a young life crisis. Kind of soccer, I was kind of not digging it anymore, and then some friends and I watched I forget which one it is, but the Sum 41 DVD, and I was like, that looks like a lot of fun, just touring and partying all the time. It's like, that'd be fun to play guitar or something in a band. And so I started learning guitar, and then I joined a crappy metal band like I think most of us did. And then we decided to make a record, and we had no idea what we were doing, so the drummer took some classes at the local community college, and I had a laptop, and we just kind of makeshift. And from there, I started researching studios and fell in love with all the big consoles and the buttons and knobs and the colors and the acoustical treatment, and it was something I was very interested in. And then because we recorded on my laptop, I would sit, I had nothing to do because the teachers loved me, so they didn't really give me any work senior year. So I was kind of playing and mixing on the computer all day long. Had no idea what I was doing, but it was fun. And then from there, I decided that, you know what, I kind of want to see if maybe I can make this a career. And so I took classes at the local community college. From there, I met Brian, the teacher, introduced me to Dan Decker at Sound Impressions. So I went in, kind of did a little bit of work for him, found out about Full Sail from Brian, the teacher, looked into that, and went down, toured, and once I saw all the studios and got to see everything, I just fell in love. And from there, I just wanted to work nonstop, just hustle. It's my passion, so I do it for fun. So I don't really have many hobbies, which, risk burnout. But from there, I just kind of started interning, engineering with Chris Crummett, Stephen Hawks, all of them, and also while doing my own studio. And eventually, my own studio just got busy enough to where I didn't intern with him anymore. From there, I flew out to Raleigh, North Carolina to help start a label called Revival Recordings with Sean and all of them, and I was kind of like the in-house engineer for their signed acts, and pretty much every Alisana record, The Emptiness onward, I was a part of. And so after I got that up and going, I decided to move back to Portland, work with Chris Crummett again, and then now I've opened up my own place. There's a lot of people that have their 9-to-5 job, and they're just kind of content with just kind of having a roof over their head and, putting food on the table, which is great. But for me, I wanted to make money doing something I loved, because when I was 17, I was cleaning porta potties and that was I've heard every pun and joke, so don't worry. And I hated it. It was absolutely miserable. And it dawned on me one morning, I woke up, I'll never forget it, and I was like, you know what? I'm getting up at 4 a.m. to ultimately make money for somebody else, and I'm just getting a very, very small piece of that. And I was like, I never want to work a job ever again. And so I quit that job, went to Puma selling shoes because I was very shy and introverted, and so I wanted to get in like a sales role, so it forced me to come out, and I sold shoes. Did a terrible job, but I got out of my shell a little bit, and then went to Full Sail. And then I've never worked a real job since. I've just been grinding and making ends meet. In my experience, where my niche kind of came in was So bands were tired of recording with Joe Schmo in mom's basement, but they couldn't afford the Chris Crummets and the Paul Levitts and the Stephen Hawks. And so I kind of hit that middle ground. And so I wasn't charging a lot, but I was charging more, and I was giving them a superior product. And so with bands, with working with producers and mixers, everybody's different. It's all an art, and everybody has a sound. So I hear horror stories, like a band will go to big name producer, pay out the butthole, and the product just came out sounding like they didn't care. Yeah, and so you got to find a person that you jive with, and that you guys can bounce ideas off of, and you dig what each other's doing, and you just kind of build a relationship. And I mean, that's more important. You have to be comfortable, and it has to be somebody that clicks. Just because it's a big time dude doesn't mean that you guys are going to click and he's going to be excited about your music. So you got to find somebody who's also excited about your music. That goes for mixing and producing. There's like this common misconception in the industry to where a producer will just change your band and make it pop. That's not true. It's too much work. If we want to do a pop band, like, we'll find a pop band, but what a producer is supposed to do is take what I say is take your music where it is right now, and then let's push you, get it to where it's 6 months ahead of where you're at, whether it be like playability or like expertise and songwriting. So that way you grow into it, and then when you're ready for the next one, you constantly grow. And a producer isn't going to change your sound. For me, I want to, exaggerate it, make it, take you to the next step, because that's kind of, again, my niche was developing bands. And so we would meet, talk about who they are, and bands like to work too hard. There's younger bands especially will have that one guy who's like, I want our band to sound like Attack Attack or Devil Wears Prada, And so like they're forcing everybody to come out and do things that they don't naturally want to do. What makes a band original, and you hear labels talk about this all the time, it's like, I've heard the sound before and there's nothing original. What makes your band original is you take everybody's influences and styles and you merge them together into something cool. You don't know where it's going to come out. All the bands I develop start one way, but then as we discover their talents, what they're good at, what they like, it becomes something completely different, and it becomes unique. So if bands were to just let go of like the power trip and the egos and just jam on what everybody's influences are, it's going to be original sounding without even trying. There's a lot of producers that also name drop. And so what they'll do is they'll tell you, oh yeah, I have connections with this label, with this manager, with this touring act, and like I could probably get you signed. But how does he know if he hasn't heard your music? How does he know because you haven't done a record yet? And it's all the time. They get people in the door, they get them to pay them, and then nothing happens, and you're out a bunch of money. So don't do that. Don't fall for that. That's probably the most common thing. And again, I'll reiterate it. You got to find somebody who you jive with. Again, just because you go with a big name guy doesn't mean it's going to work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You got to find somebody who's experienced. And don't be afraid. Like, you got to interview these people, talk to them, have a one-on-one conversation like you and I are doing, just to see if it works. Like, there's a band on We Are Triumphant called Marked Life that I've been talking to. We had like an hour-and-a-half call with the manager and members of the band, and we just talked about like what kind of styles we liked, what we're into. We cracked a lot of jokes, so we learned that our personalities work, and hopefully we'll be working together in the future. They seemed excited. Same with a band called Say We Can Fly that's on We Are Triumphant. Yeah, same thing. We just had a talk and over Instagram and texting, and now after I mixed a song for him that's going in like a Canadian film in the credits. It's really cool. It's like a Christmas comedy. And so now we're saying like, dude, if you ever just want to get on the phone and talk about life, let's do it, because we connected. And I've had a lot of bands that we don't connect, and that, don't be discouraged by that. There's a bunch of metal bands that want to do the deathcore thing, and I'm not a deathcore guy, and so like, sure, I can make some money off of them, but it's not going to benefit anybody, because it's going to be chances are it's not going to sound as good as it could, so that makes me look bad. and that makes them look bad because they're out a bunch of money and they have, they have a product that they weren't really looking for. So in that case, I refer them to people that I know. Like, I'll shout out to Mike Somm. He does really good metal. He's in a band called Impulse, if you want to check him out. He does really good metal, and so I'll refer people to him all the time. I don't want your money, and money makes me uncomfortable, like, to talk about, because I'm sure I'm like a lot of artists. I undervalue myself. A lot of artists are very introverted and emotional, and so I just want to work on cool music. If you got a good progression with a good melody or a good scream pattern over the top, I'm down. In every artist, I learned something new because everybody has a different influencer and different style. I would say probably the most beneficial thing for me was being able to bounce back and forth. Working under Chris Crummett, who is, in my opinion, just insane, phenomenal. And he's really tall and I'm short, so it's a very funny combination. But being able to bounce between like Issues and Dance Gavin Dance, and then coming back to working with locals and trying to develop them. So it was when I wasn't working, I was a fly on the wall, and so I got to see how really successful bands like Issues work, like their work ethic, their style, what's their workflow, what do they do on the off time, how do they practice, stuff like that. What do they eat? And so I can take that knowledge and then bring it to smaller bands who are wanting to take that step. And the way I put it is, we try to figure out what door or avenue you should be going down, because that's confusing for bands. And then we make a product, and I give you the tools after we pick the door for you to like use on the other side. And then once stuff leaves the studio, I have a little bit of knowledge, but not so much. The studio is definitely my expertise. But I know people, if I dig the band and the record turned out cool, I'll connect them with people. There's a band called Not My Weekend. That's who we're writing for with Kellen. They have been developing them for a long time. Like, the way that record started, they were on tour, and they came through Portland, and they were friends with one of my roommates, and so they came over, crashed, got shower, laundry, and we were on the back porch. At that time, I was a smoker, and I was like, show me some of your demos. What do you got? And then Pat showed me a couple things, but then his original version of When You're Around came on. And I was like, dude, that song, that's the one. And so we immediately went downstairs and we just started messing with it. And then we got it kind of like structured out. Maybe like, I think we maybe recorded like a couple guitar riffs, and maybe I added some drums and stuff, electronic drums. But then after that, they finished the tour, went home, and then they came back. Because we connected and we were on the same page with the music, and it turned out really cool. I would tell my younger self to not stress out so much, because when you're stressed out and you're in a bad mood, your work suffers. And the way my mom puts it is, I always want to go from A to Z and not take the steps in between. So when I was younger and I wasn't doing mixes or records like Chris Lord-Alge or, Courtney Ballard, I would be really hard on myself, and I'd be like, what the hell? And I get angry, and I would overthink, and I would overdo, and then I usually made the record worse. So that's another thing that I would tell my younger self, is to quickly move on. Don't overthink things, because if you're sitting there, you're trying to make it perfect, because I'm a perfectionist, chances are you're making it worse and worse and worse as you go. So once you have something cool, or if you're kind of struggling with something, just move on. Time management. Okay, this isn't working, move on. Chances are you'll hear it tomorrow and it'll be fine. And you're like, oh, a couple tweaks, done. Learned that from a dude named Kit Walters the hard way. We were working on a Skylit Drive record, and I was going for completely perfect takes, and so the music went over our allotted time. And, Kit came in to produce the vocals on that with Jag. And everybody, he was upset, and I didn't get it. But then after, working with Chris and then doing it on my own, I slowly learned the hard way about time management. So that's probably the most important things I would tell myself when I was younger. We were talking before the interview. Corona actually hasn't affected me really at all. I'm pretty much a recluse. I stay in the studio constantly. And so, I mean, I spend way too much on Uber Eats and like Amazon grocery delivery. And so like the quarantine, everybody's talking about how they're going crazy. And I'm just like, this is what I normally do. I just, it's not weird now. And people still come in, artists, musicians. All of my roommates are musicians. So sometimes we'll dink around. My roommate has started a new like label and media company just a couple weeks ago, actually. So that's exciting. He's had a couple artists come in, one of them being another roommate. And so, yeah, it hasn't really changed. Everybody got the stimulus check and they wanted to make a record. A lot of bands are doing like a show streaming. So they'll like rent out a venue and they'll stream. And Amber Lynn, who I like, they did that and they sold like 3,000 tickets, like, yeah. And so it's like and it's cool, but I think it might change the industry a little bit, because with a streaming concert, you can get everybody around the world to come in. You can't do that when you're touring, and you got expenses when you're touring. So I think that might change the industry a little bit. Not My Weekend, obviously. Their new stuff that we're writing is going to be legit. The All Season is a band that I'm developing right now. They're from Portland. A dude named Deezy, who's a rapper, but he's doing it over like rock stuff. He's on my roommate's new label. It's called Moguls, by the way. Alisana, obviously, all the bands I've worked with. A band that just released their debut single called Memoirs. They're from here, so I would check them out. Memoirs PDX, I think, is their handle. And they're doing some really cool stuff. They got some, I don't know, like their pictures are rad. A girl named Clark did it here in town, and so check her out too. They tag her in all the photos. Their photos are really rad. But yeah, a lot of exciting stuff. Some potential bands on We Are Triumphant, might be coming through. Possibly a Hopeless band. So it's exciting stuff. I'm digging. Life is good right now.